It's time for the Voice of Reason podcast. Here are your hosts, Sean Phillips, Andy Van Beber, and Travis Kirkendall.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Voice of Reason podcast. My name is Andy Van Beber. Joining me today is our representative from what district are we, by the way, Chad?
We're the 40th Missouri.
40th Missouri District Representative Chad Perkins. Welcome. Glad to have you.
Great to be here.
Sean is continuing in his military training out in California on his next step in his military journey. So he hopefully will be back with us in 2 weeks. So, but no, this is part two of our series on the last 4 years. Last week we had Sarah Rutherford on. We thank Sarah Rutherford for being our representative for the left. And the first guy that came to my mind when I thought of the right.
Yeah, well, thank you. Yeah, you said something to me about it a couple of weeks ago when we were just trying to make the schedules work,
Yep.
and tonight works great, and glad to do it.
Yeah, we're glad to have you. Why don't you give us a little bit about your political background, how you got into politics, kind of your journey that you've had.
Yeah, all right, sounds great. So, I've kind of lived here in Pike County all my life, right? Worked in radio, that's, I think, probably my true calling in life is working in radio. Was mayor of Bowling Green for a while. Kind of thought about running at one point in time. Jim Hansen signed up, and I said, well, I don't want to have to compete, right? So I just kind of wait your turn, and
Right.
That's the thing about term limits in Missouri is, hey, it's just 8 years down the road,
Yep.
So did my time as mayor in Bowling Green. When the opportunity came up, took it, and been pretty pleased with it thus far.
And you are we going to get a hint maybe as to what comes after this next term?
Well, at the moment, I'm currently running for Speaker Pro Tem in the House of Representatives. Mm-hmm. Feel pretty good about that, right? Got a whip count going, feel strong about that. And, you keep your options open and just kind of, at the moment, looking at doing the best job we possibly can at what we're doing at the moment and running for that leadership position in the House.
Awesome. So this series, we've called it the last 4 years. Obviously, we took it from the Democratic side last week. And this week, we're going to take it from Republican conservative side. And one of the things that we're going to do is address a few questions. And like I said, I've given you, I'll interject and play devil's advocate a couple times and everything.
Well, as any good government teacher should do, you should be able to argue both sides.
I tell you what, that's why one of the reasons why we don't have a huge audience, but we have an audience that likes to listen to us because we try to be balanced. We make fun of Trump, we make fun of Biden, and we make just when we look at both sides. We have our passion has always been geopolitics, and around the world. So we'll get into some of that. We'll start domestic, and then we'll work our way out.
Sure, sounds great.
So let's rewind. Let's start way back at the beginning, 2020, when he takes over. And how did you view the economic policies implemented by the Biden administration, particularly in response to the COVID-19 pandemic? Maybe you can talk a little bit about what you thought about his response to the pandemic first, and then kind of get into the economics of it a little bit as you go.
All right. Well, let's talk about let's talk about COVID then for a minute if we can, and I'll give you the truths on COVID. And as far as I see it, there are three truths on COVID. Right. The first of which is it's a real disease, man. It's not the cold. It's not a cold. It's not the flu. I've had family members die of it. It's a real disease.
Right.
That is true. What we also know to be true is it came out of China. We
Right.
know
Yep.
that to
Wuhan.
be
Yep.
true. We know that to be true. What we also know to be true is that every form of government there is, city, county, state, federal government, health departments, even school districts, used it as an opportunity to take a certain amount of liberties from people. I believe that.
Mm-hmm.
And that is something we can never allow to happen again, right? I mean, everybody just fell in line with, I'm willing to give up whatever I can for a little bit of protection, or what they perceive to be protection. If you think, how on earth did the German people in 1939 fall in line with the Nazi movement? Well, it's not hard to see. It almost happened here. I mean, people are going to say, oh, he's being ridiculous. I'm not being ridiculous, man. Everybody was willing to give up their freedoms and their liberties in exchange for what they perceived to be protection. And it happened quick. And all those things that I told you, I believe to be true.
So did you think, so you said liberties. So obviously the first liberty of choice. Do I want to get a vaccine? Do I have to wear a mask? Do I have to, at what point did you believe during the pandemic that the government had when did you believe that they started overstepping their bounds? That line, where was the line in the sand, you think, when they started crossing?
Sure. There were places in America, right, where they shut the churches down. And I'm relatively certain there are parts of the Constitution that says the government can't do that. It says the government shall make no laws respecting the establishment of religion. Now, what does that mean? It means that it's true. The United States government cannot say yes to a religion. But it also means that it can't say no.
Right.
It means that the U.S. government cannot get involved in matters of religious conscience. And at that point in time, they overstep their bounds.
So I'll go. So one of the things, since you told me before the broadcast, and I said I didn't want to listen to the Democrat, and I appreciate that.
Yeah, I don't want to hear. I don't want to know the questions coming in advance.
Right. And so one of the things that, and I want you to respond to this, because she kind of responded to what you said before. I mean, that was the arguments that she had heard. But she brought up examples like of Italy and Australia and New Zealand, those guys who got a quicker tap on COVID than we did.
Uh-huh.
And her thing was, we're stubborn Americans. They did the complete lockdown because they wanted, for the safety of the people.
Yeah.
Do you buy into that argument? Or do
absolutely not. It's absolutely ridiculous. It is absolutely un-American. What is liberty worth? Well, it's priceless. How do I know that? Because millions of Americans have given up their life for that.
Right.
My grandfather fought in Germany. My grandfather, the same man who also, 6 or 7 years later went and fought in Korea.
Right.
So is liberty worth more than life itself? Absolutely right it is. Absolutely right it is. And it is offensive for someone to suggest otherwise.
Right. And when I just, from my own, when we went through COVID, one of the things that we came back in the fall of, I believe it was the fall of 20 when we came back, and all the restrictions that were placed upon us, even in our school district at the local level, was just at the point of just being ridiculous. It's like, okay, we're giving you the option to stay at home. We're giving you the option of, but I mean, it was just a lot of, and like you said, a lot of people said that's government interference. That's government, but. So, yeah, both ways people thought.
Not to mention, you can say, well, Australia did a better job of handling it. Well, I will say this to you. It's certainly a lot easier when there are 35 million people living in 3 million square miles versus 350 million people living in 3 million square miles, right? I mean, it is certainly easier to avoid others that way.
Right.
Just all these folks fell in line with whatever was told to them. Looking back, much of it was based on nothing at all.
Yeah.
At all.
And I think it was a lot of people, the concern was, because we were rushing through this. I think it was a rush, And so, again, we're trying to present both sides of that, but those are great points.
And I'll be honest with you, Andy, and I don't mind telling anyone this. I got a vaccine.
I did too.
Because I chose to.
Yes.
If the government had come to me and said, you got to do it, I'd say there's no way in hell I'm doing that.
Right.
Because you're not going to tell me what I have to do.
Right.
I got it because I chose to. Mm-hmm. Now, with all that being said, I'll simply say to you, if I got a polio vaccine once, and then I got a polio vaccine twice, and then I got a third polio vaccine, and I still got polio, I'd be asking some questions.
Right.
I would say, this is not a vaccine. For the first 42 years of my life, a vaccine was something that you got and you were not going to get it.
Right.
And then all of a sudden there's, oh, no, that's not what a vaccine is. You're wrong. Well, for 42 years of my life, you told me that's exactly what a vaccine is.
Right.
And I'm 46 years old now, right? And I've gotten COVID 3 times since then. And it sucks, man. It does. Right? Mm-hmm. It sucks. But I try to stay in fairly good shape. I try to, whatever, I just hang out at the house for, however many days, right? And do my thing. Mm-hmm. But
so do you think it's a call for more citizens instead of the government coming in? So what I'm hearing you say is it's the response. Let citizens, be responsible for themselves instead of the government trying to.
America is about personal responsibility, right? I mean, people always want to blame someone else. Right. At some point in time, you are responsible for yourself. That's that is one of the key differences between the left and the right, isn't it? Yeah. The left says, "Oh, the government needs a program for that. The government needs to do this. The government needs to do that." On the right, we say the government needs to leave me alone.
Right.
I can work this out. I don't need your help, right? Arbitrate disagreements between the state, mm-hmm. and provide for the common defense, and leave me alone.
Right. Excellent. Well, then, so we get into the other hot topic that folks are still, myself included, the Biden administration's handling of immigration, particularly southern border.
That's right. That's right.
Give us the rundown what your thought was of the disaster. I'm pretty centrist, but I look at this, and one of our hosts, Travis Kirkendall, mm-hmm. his mother-in-law is from Venezuela.
Yeah.
And for someone to try to get across legally, it's a nightmare.
That's right.
But we have open. What do you feel about the Biden's response?
If you don't have a border, you don't have a country. We all are immigrants to this country to some degree, right? I've got a little Native American in me. Mm-hmm. Most of us have some degree of that, right? But otherwise, a lot of us come from, our ancestry comes from somewhere else. But my ancestors did it the right way. We can trace that back from when my English ancestors came here in 1610 and my German ancestors came here in the 1880s, right? We can trace all that back to when that happened. They did it the right way. If you want to come to America, how do you know America is the greatest country on earth? Despite what anybody might say, it's the place that everyone wants to get to.
Right.
And we are the greatest country on earth, and you know that for a fact. But you got to do it the right way. And if you want to come here and you want to do it the right way, we encourage that. But you've got to do it the right way. Your first act as an American cannot be to enter this country illegally.
Mm-hmm. And I looked at, when Biden first came in, we're going to halt construction of the wall. Uh-huh. We're going to halt construction of the wall. He ended Trump's travel ban from, I believe it was 14 countries.
Uh-huh.
And
by the way, those countries, if we look at it, we're talking Venezuela.
Yep.
Which, by the way, the Venezuelan people are fantastic.
It's the socialist government.
It is the government that's running that country that's the problem, right? The Maduro regime is
his last election, yeah.
Exactly right. He gets 98% of the vote. There's no way that happened.
Right.
Okay, so you're looking at Venezuela, Iran, China.
Right.
These are not our friends.
Right.
These are not our friends.
Right.
There's a certain amount of security and safety that comes through strength. Mm-hmm. Like Donald Trump or not, the world is afraid of the man.
Oh, yeah.
And to be quite frank with you.
We said that before, yeah.
But to be quite frank with you, I don't think there's anything wrong with that. Mm-hmm. I don't think there's anything wrong with the world saying, man, you don't want to mess with the President of the United States. You know?
Right.
There's not a thing wrong with that.
So,
do you think anybody's scared of Joe Biden?
Well, I'm not.
I know you asked the question.
Yeah, I know.
I'll pose the question.
Yeah, but,
your listeners can make their mind up for that themselves.
And then the whole thing about reaffirming the protections to the DACA recipients,
right.
And my mind was blown, kind of like with what you said was we have to maintain borders, and I'm not either one. I don't not a Trump supporter. I'm not really a Biden supporter. I'm still making up my mind.
By the way, and I congratulate you on that. You teach high school government.
Yeah.
And I think if a high school government teacher is doing their job correctly, you have no idea what their politics are.
Yeah.
That's how I want. I don't want my high school government teachers to come in and say everything that Chad Perkins says and does is right. I don't want that.
Right.
I also don't want them to come in and say everything the Republican Party does is wrong. I want them to come in and say, and you have no idea what their politics are.
Right.
That's how it should be.
And that's how. And I think that's one of the problems. And that's another reason why we do this is so we can have a bunch of when we had the show last week. It was kind of funny. We have our live comments, and I monitor that and everything. Everybody knows that we record now because just what it is, technology. But on our chat board, there was somebody said, "Well, why don't you bring in the Republican and Democrat at the same time?" And I'm like, "No, I want to be able to have both of them fully say and not get in, And I think one of the issues is if somebody's going to try to tell them, and again, I don't try to tell my students anything. It's, hey, you got to vote this way. I tell them, research.
And that's how it should be.
Yeah. So, so then when we get into the things that Biden did, especially expanding the Affordable Care Act, expanding.
Right.
What was it? I had some stats that he said. Where was it at? Extended Medicaid through the ACA. The average savings people on health premiums were $800 a year. This is from his State of the Union address, of course. He said this was the most time Americans having health care in history. And an interesting fact for us in Missouri, Oklahoma, and South Dakota, an extra $1.5 billion was added in Medicaid funding. Is he doing his job, or is that, again, does that go back to your previous thing of, what's your thought on the medical?
Yeah, well, my thought on it is the same as Ronald Reagan's was ever so many years ago when he said, I think the best welfare program is getting a job, right? Mm-hmm. I believe that Americans of a certain age, right, and that age is someone who's working age, right, 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s. If you want health care, you get a job that provides health care. Right. I believe that capitalism lifts people up out of poverty. Apparently, the Biden administration believes that everyone should be on a government program.
Right.
I believe that the system we have is what has created the greatest amount of wealth in the history of the world. And I think that if I said to you, hey, you can have Medicaid or Medicare, or you can have health insurance through your job, which one do you think is going to be better? It's going to be the health insurance through your job.
It should, yeah.
It's going to be the health insurance through your job. And I bet that's what the medical provider would agree with also, right? So I think that if you look at the numbers also, if you receive Medicaid benefits, not Medicare benefits, but Medicaid benefits, and I'll tell you why. I don't view Medicare as a social program, or certainly as a welfare program. It's an entitlement of every American once they reach a certain age because you paid into it.
Right.
Medicare on the other hand is
Medicaid. Yeah.
Excuse me. That's right. Medicaid on the other hand is a social program designed for people who can't afford something else. Right. That's what Medicaid is, and expanding Medicaid. If you look at the numbers closely. And I don't have those numbers in front of me, but if you were on a Medicaid program, you were far more likely to have voted for Joe Biden than you were to have voted for Donald Trump. Mm-hmm. What Biden is doing is increasing people's dependency upon the government.
Right.
I mean, this is LBJ and the Great Society all over again.
Yes.
If you make people dependent upon the government, they're more likely to vote Democrat. That is a fact.
Buying votes.
They're buying votes. Not with their money, with your money.
Right.
Yeah, no, I absolutely think that there's nothing sincere, there's nothing magnanimous or grand about what he's doing. He's buying votes. That's what he's doing.
So I want to, you mentioned something, and you answered my healthcare question, but I want to go back to something else that you said about capitalism. So this was brought up last week by our guest, and we got into kind of what you said there was the belief that Republicans have in trickle-down economics. Mm-hmm. Okay, Reaganomics, if you will, but I mean it's been around.
Supply-side economics.
Right,
call it what you may.
Call it whatever you want to.
That's right.
And we hear this argument from the left all the time that trickle down economics doesn't work. You know, you just said, I mean, bottom up doesn't work either. We're seeing how that drains our system. So, what's your? I already know what you're going to answer, but what's your response to someone who says, "Hey, trickle down economics doesn't work because you have greedy corporations, you have all these people who are, you know, instead of letting it instead of reinvesting it, instead of passing it on to your workers, they pass it on to the shareholders." How do you respond to that?
Well, I'm going to give you a one-word answer, and then I'll go into some detail, right?
Okay.
My one-word answer is history.
Right.
I mean, how do I know it works? Because it has.
Mm-hmm.
It has every time it's been implemented. Mm-hmm. And to suggest otherwise is ridiculous. No reasonable person would think that it doesn't work. Reagan proved it worked in the 80s. Adam Smith proved it in the 18th century,
Nations,
right? Mm-hmm. The Wealth of Nations, laissez-faire, Adam Smith. If you haven't read it, put that on your things to read list. It was written in 1776. There were two great things written in 1776, right?
Right.
And one of them was The Wealth of Nations by Adam Smith. Mm-hmm. Read it. So when you say, well, corporations can't do the job, it's government that can do the job. Government does the job better than a corporation does. All right. Then, okay, then here's my point to you. You win the Powerball jackpot. You want somebody to send you the check. Who's delivering that? The U.S. Postal Service or UPS? You're going to have UPS. First of all, you're going to go pick it up yourself. But
I was going to say, I'm not having either one of them.
But if you're trusting one or the other,
right,
you're trusting UPS. And the fact of the matter is, the post office has been around since the invention of this country.
Right.
And this is nothing against our local postal carriers. They're fantastic. Rain, sleet, snow, 100 degrees like it is today.
Yep.
The average working person on the street does fantastic. The problem is the bureaucracy of it.
Everything behind it, right.
So, I mean, they should have the market cornered. And they're subsidized by the government. They should have the market cornered.
And they're losing money.
And UPS is just better.
Right.
What else do I need to do to tell you that private companies do things better than the government does? Mm-hmm. I mean, right now, we have astronauts getting saved in space, right? By a private corporation, not by NASA.
Yep.
I mean, private corporations can always do things better than the government can. If we find oil on Mars, Elon's going to be there in 3 years.
Right.
You know, that's just how it works. The private business will always do things better than the government. Do they do it perfect? Is there some corruption? Well, of course there is. Does greed exist? Well, I think to some degree everybody operates in their own best interest, right? The world's not full of, we're not all Gandhi, you know.
Right.
But the private corporation is just going to do better than the government.
Mm-hmm. I agree with that. My feeling, and again, I wish there was my biggest problem is that there's not working class folks, like you said, the people who do jobs, the people who have jobs and are working and paying our taxes and everything else, when that's because it is going to, and I hate to say it, but it is going to the lower half more than we're getting, and I totally lost my train of thought. But the other thing that I look at though is you're creating more government loopholes and more places for waste to go. Whenever you want to
talk about corruption and waste.
Yeah.
I mean, come on. So, for example, the Medicaid system in itself builds in a 25% loss every year,
right,
which means for every dollar you put in, they believe 25 cents of it's just going to get wasted, right? That's what it means.
Right.
Walmart, on the other hand, builds in a 3% loss. And if that number goes above 3%, heads are going to roll.
Right.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
The government is building in 25% of every dollar you send them. They know they're just going to waste.
They're going to lose it.
No one can operate like that. No one. It's ridiculous. You know, if you want to talk about bureaucracy, I get down on MoDOT all the time, right? I get down on MoDOT all the time.
Go ahead. We'll let you.
Once again, the man and woman working at the local MoDOT shed, working on the road.
Great job.
Doing fantastic.
Right.
The problem exists within the bureaucracy above that. Mm-hmm. And you would never operate a private company the way they operate. It's just ridiculous.
And the great points there. So I asked this question, and you also you didn't mention, I don't remember you mentioning, but you also were in law enforcement for a while.
That's right. That's right.
Pike County Sheriff's Department for how long?
21 years total.
21 years. So we hear the term social justices.
Yeah.
Racial social justice.
Yeah.
Okay. Criminal justice reform.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So in your opinion, how did the Biden administration address, or did they address, or were they playing to the African American crowd? How did they address race? How well do you think they addressed racial and social justice issues?
Yeah.
Including, we can go with police reform.
Sure, right.
Police reform and stuff like that.
And, I might surprise you to some degree because I do think a certain amount of criminal justice reform is necessary. Mm-hmm. I think that a certain amount of that needs to take place. I absolutely do. I support some criminal justice reform. 100% I do. With that being said, it seems to me we were at a point in time 15 years ago where we were getting beyond those things, right? It seems to me like the government has an interest in keeping us at odds with each other. It seems like they benefit when they say you are at the point in your life that you are because someone else put you there. And the only people that benefit by that are the government. It seems to me that is the case, right? So let me start by saying when you say social justice, well, you can talk about DEI, right? Diversity, equity, and inclusion, which, by the way, to their credit, the University of Missouri completely did away with.
Really?
Completely did away with. The president of the University of Missouri, Dr. Choi, is fantastic. We have the best university president in the country right now. Mm-hmm. What I will say to you is this. When I go to the doctor, because there for a while they were saying, well, a certain amount of our med students have to be of this race, of this gender, of blah, 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 blah. I don't care if my doctor's white, black, yellow, green, purple. I just want them to be the best at what they do, mm-hmm. right? I mean, reverse racism is racism.
Right.
And so I think that all these terms, call it what you will, are designed to keep people at odds with one another. So I think as a society, what you want to go to, the point you want to get at, is where people say, hey, your doctor is black, your doctor is white, your doctor is gay, your doctor is straight, your doctor is what. I don't care. I just want them to be good at what they do.
So with the creation of that, so you one of the things you said there was, Biden has addressed, he's trying to, again, you said they're trying to keep each other at odds. Racial equality is something that I push for. I mean, mm-hmm. I have 2 Chinese children,
right?
So I'm looking at this as I don't want people to see what the color of their skin is. Mm-hmm.
Well, and I'll say to you this: just here in the state of Missouri, we have a new incoming speaker who's an Asian American. Mm-hmm. We just elected statewide by a large margin a state treasurer who's an Indian American who immigrated here. Vivek Malik, who immigrated here 20 years ago or so, and he got a great story to tell, where he tells you he came here with $300 in his pocket, right? Got into college at Cape Girardeau, went on to law school, lived the American dream. Mm-hmm. And he will tell you, if you want to do it like he did it. Do it the right way. Mm-hmm. So some suggestion that the right is somehow racist. Well, the right just elected an Asian American speaker.
Right.
The right just elected by a huge margin an Indian American immigrant. Mm-hmm. So I mean, that's ridiculous. That's ridiculous to suggest those things.
Right, and you have to look back at record, at history. So let's look then at what is the state, what do you perceive the Republican state is towards the LGBTQ community and equality there? Where do you see the Republicans going in that area? Are they still?
No, I don't know any of them that care.
Okay.
I don't know a single Republican that cares whether you're straight or gay. They don't care. And
Because as you said, that's one of those divisive things that are put in there
done to do that. Right. They don't care whether you're gay or straight. The right doesn't care. Doesn't care. In fact, there are a number. We just term limited out a member who is openly gay.
Mm-hmm.
Spent 8 years in the House of Representatives from St. Charles County, openly gay, as a Republican.
Mm-hmm. Really? As
a Republican.
I didn't know that.
And by the way, nobody cared.
Nobody cared.
Nobody cared. Okay. Now, the left will tell you, oh, the Republicans care.
Bigoted
well, apparently we don't. Apparently we don't. I mean, I will say to you, where that line gets drawn is when it comes to transgender issues.
Okay.
Right? And I'll speak on that. Don't mind doing so. Don't mind doing so.
Go ahead.
I believe that biological boys cannot, absolutely under no circumstance, cannot play high school sports with a girl, with a biological girl.
I agree with you 2,000%.
Now, with that being said, you and I both know we all played Little League, we all played T-ball, we all played against the other gender when we were 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 years old.
Right.
There comes a point in time when you can't do that.
Right.
We absolutely draw that line.
I do, and I mean,
and by the way, I just want to say this. That's not hatred of one versus the other. It is not, regardless of what someone may say.
Safety and fairness.
That's right. The same people that said we got to pass Title IX 45 years ago are the same people that say, it doesn't matter. A man can beat a woman.
Right. And I mean,
you talk about hypocrisy. That's the hypocrisy of the left.
Right. That's what Title IX was all about.
Yes.
That's exactly what it was all about. So I'm going to ask one more domestic question, then we'll cross over on the foreign side. And a lot of people are asking this question.
Let me finish up a little bit on that thought also, right?
Sure.
I have gay friends, one which was a member of the House for 8 years.
Yeah.
Who will say, oh, don't put that transgender stuff on us. That's not us.
Right.
We don't support that either.
Right.
The left wants to put it all together as one big group and say you're hating everybody. We're not hating anyone.
Right.
And in fact, gay Republicans are saying, we don't want to be a part of that. Don't put the transgender stuff with us. That's not us. So to lump it all as one group is disingenuous.
Right. That's a great point. Great point. So here's the obvious question: how do you view the administration's handling of inflation and the rising cost of living?
Well, my answer to that is simple. I went by the grocery store today. How do you think I feel?
Yeah.
How do you think I feel about that? Right? I mean, you can say, well, the president doesn't have any control over these things. Well, that's not what the left was saying when George W. Bush was president and gas prices went high. You got to be consistent. Either the president does have something to do with it or he doesn't. Right? First of all, I think that a federal minimum wage is a little bit ridiculous, right? Because we're here in Louisiana, Missouri.
Right.
What it takes to live a comfortable life in Louisiana, Missouri, and what it takes to live a comfortable life in San Francisco are not the same thing. Right. So the idea that some federal minimum wage is out of this world, right? Just the most ridiculous thing.
Which is what one of the things that Kamala is promising: a federal $15 an hour raise.
So when the 16-year-old kid working at McDonald's is making $15 an hour, and you wonder why the price of your food went up, well, thanks a lot, Kamala.
Yeah. I have this issue, and I've tried to explain this. How inflation works, and this is basic economics. I don't get people. Why don't we understand that when you raise the price of production?
That's right.
And this is some of our discussion that our friends on the left have had. Well, it's corporate greed, and we've heard Joe Biden use that term.
Yeah.
Corporate greed is what's causing inflation because they're not, and they want to maintain their.
One thing causes.
That's what you say, capitalism. I mean, that's what capitalism is.
There's one thing that creates inflation, and one thing only. There are too many. There's too much money out there chasing too few goods.
Right.
That's what causes corporate greed. When the government pumps trillions and trillions and trillions into the American economy, what do you expect to happen? Mm-hmm. This is this is the outcome of that, right? There's just too much money out there chasing too few goods. That drives the price up for everybody, and it's not good for anyone. That's the corporate greed. Corporate greed exists. Of course, it exists.
Well,
I mean, every business in the world,
bottom line.
every business in the world has the same business model, right? The business of business is making money,
Right.
but the problem that has created inflation is the government's pumped way too much money into the economy. That's what's created inflation.
I agree. Okay, so there's foreign, or there's domestic. Let's go foreign. And I wish Travis was on tonight because he did his time in Afghanistan. So again, this is a little bit of a rewind. What is your opinion of? Let's talk Biden's foreign policy, and let's start with the withdrawal from Afghanistan.
Yeah. I think the problem with the Biden foreign policy is that it doesn't exist. There is no foreign policy. I mean, the withdrawal from Afghanistan was a disaster. Well, here we are on just right at the 3-year anniversary of the horrible events that took place at the airport.
Yeah.
And I believe that a structured withdrawal. We know this now because of history, right? A structured withdrawal was in place. Some framework was there designed to do that withdrawal over the course of some time, right?
Right.
How on earth did the Biden administration get this wrong? How did they get that wrong?
Well, I can't remember what the dollar amount was.
But it's in the billions.
That we left over
Yeah.
there, and then
That's right.
I mean, it's not us that has it. It's the Taliban.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right.
And it was kind of like what Travis will tell you, it was like a slap in the face to any guy who spent time on
That's
the
right.
ground in Afghanistan. One of our Clopton alumni, you may know him, may not, Jordan Phelps.
Of course I know Jordan Phelps, yeah.
Jordan Phelps I still remember the night that he actually served his, whichever it was, I think it was Prince Henry that was serving with the British military at the time. They were serving on that same base, and they came under a firefight one night, and I remember we got a call. We got a call to a football game, Clopton football game. Hey, it was from Jordan's mom, and I'm very close with Jordan, and it just was like, oh my goodness. And then to talk to him now, because he lost friends that night.
Yeah, I'm sure
He
did.
lost.
Yeah.
He
Very
saw his
personal for him.
Yeah, and so, I mean, do you think that there's? You said it yourself. There's no foreign policy.
It just doesn't exist. Right. There is no Biden foreign policy.
So do you think that? Can you? When Donald Trump says I can end the war in Ukraine,
And I believe it.
quickly.
I believe it.
What do you think within the Biden system?
Sure.
Is it something that's expanding this war in Ukraine and Russia? Is it a lack of us doing something, or what?
Yeah.
What's missing here?
A weak America has destabilized the entire planet, right? And it's so ridiculous because the left is saying it again. Oh, if Donald Trump gets elected, we're going to war all over. Well, they said that 8 years ago. Donald Trump was president for 4 years. We weren't in any wars at all. We were in no wars. Now you have this disturbance that was just terrible. The events in Afghanistan. The Ukraine is a disaster. Israel is a disaster. The Middle East period is a disaster. And this is all because of the weakness of the Biden administration, right? So you can say Donald Trump is going to put us all in war. Well, it didn't happen before, so you sound stupid when you say it now. I mean, you sound beyond stupid when you say it now. The man was president for 4 years. It didn't happen.
Right.
But it was going to be the end of the world. Well, you can only, it's like Henny Penny and the sky is falling. You can only say that so many times and people just stop listening, right? Mm-hmm. So clearly the man knows what he's doing, despite what you might say. The man, I know that you might believe the orange man is evil. That's what the left wants to tell you, right? And he doesn't know what he's doing, and he's going to get us into war. Well, you're wrong. And it's so obvious you're wrong because he was president for 4 years and it didn't happen, right? I mean, yeah, he said a few things and some tweets that maybe made you feel a little uncomfortable. Mm-hmm. But gas was cheaper, food was cheaper, the world was safer. It didn't make me feel uncomfortable. When people say, oh, he's a bully. First of all, you cheapen the word when you throw it around all the time like that, right?
Right.
Because who's he a bully to? I've never once seen him pick someone and just say, I'm going after that guy. I've never seen it happen.
Mm-hmm. He
hits back on people that hit him.
Mm-hmm.
Right, wrong, indifferent, don't care. But he never initiates a fight. Mm-hmm. If you hit him, he's going to hit you back.
Right.
But that is not bullying. That's not bullying. That's a counterpuncher. So when you say he's a bully, you're an idiot for saying that. Mm-hmm. You're an idiot for saying that because he never has ever initiated a fight with anyone.
Right. Okay. So let me go a step further then. And again, I'm giving you the benefit of what was said last week.
Uh-huh.
But how do you respond then when somebody says, okay, well, does Donald Trump have an inside track with Vladimir Putin? Does he have an inside track with Kim Jong-un? And they know each other, and there's maybe some manipulation going on there. I mean,
what?
Oh yeah.
Is that what they say? Because let me take you back to like 2012 when Barack Obama's on. You remember when he's on the stage with the then president who spent like 4 years as president of Russia. What was his name? Medvedev or something.
Yeah, between Boris Yeltsin and yes, yeah.
Well, between the first Putin run and the second Putin run, right? Because the law then said he couldn't serve whatever, right? But then that got changed.
Okay.
And Obama said to Medvedev, and the mic was hot, and he said, let Putin know, once I get reelected, once I beat, was it Mitt Romney? Once I beat Mitt Romney, I'll have more leverage to do what I want to do. What are you talking about when you say that Trump has something? First of all, let's start off by saying a world where the president of the United States can pick up a phone and have a conversation with the president of Russia is not a problem. No. What on earth makes you think that's a bad thing?
Right.
If you're not talking to the people who are your geopolitical enemies, and they are. Russia's not our friend.
Right.
China's not our friend.
Right.
Right? These aren't our friends. But the interesting thing, and I guess enough about Putin, is that he is one person out there kind of doing his own thing in the world. You know? He's doing his own thing, right? Yeah. I mean, he's not taking direction from anyone. But in a world where the president of the United States can pick up the phone and have a conversation with the president of China, that's not a bad world to be in, right? Where the president of the United States can pick up the phone and say to the Chinese president, you're not going to do that. You know? Mm-hmm. Why on earth would the left suggest that somehow that's a problem? I mean, the inability to talk to someone that you disagree with is weakness. And the left just screams weakness all the time. And I think that Americans are tired of being weak.
Being put class. So then we move. So Ukraine, Russia. So and you mentioned a little bit about Israel. Let's get into this.
Yeah.
So with that attack, I believe it was in October.
That's right. Or
October,
just shy of a year
at that music festival.
Yeah.
And the attack by Hamas, and we see that it not provoked in any way, shape, or form. Mm-mm. And so now we're like you said, we're coming up on a year anniversary. What are we? Let's look at this. What's Biden doing wrong with this situation? What do you feel the Biden administration is doing wrong? Because some people think, and again, this was our friend on the left who said, you know, if you're siding, and they call Israel the aggressor. So if you're siding with the aggressor, how can you call yourself a human being if you're siding with the aggressor? And I disagree with her on there because
she's wrong.
Well,
because she's just wrong.
Right.
So let me start off by saying, as it pertains to Israel, for me, this isn't political. This is beyond politics. This is sacred, right? Because to me, Israel is a land promised to Abraham and his descendants by God, right? When people say, well, Israel became a country in 1948, 1949 by an act of the United Nations, I said that's not true. Israel became a country 4,000 years ago, and God promised that land to Abraham. Mm-hmm. So for me, this isn't politics, and I just want to be frank with you about that.
No, yeah.
I just want to be frank with you about that. So when people say Israel is the aggressor, well, you sound stupid. I don't know who your person was last week.
Why would you say that?
Because it's simple, right? So Israel, a stable democracy of 10 million people, in the middle of an unstable part of the world, surrounded by 500 million people that want to see them wiped off the earth.
Exactly.
That is Israel. Stable democracy friendly to the United States, where they have a political system where even if you're not Jewish, you can be a Muslim and get elected to their Knesset, which is, their Congress, their parliament, right? Their legislative body. First of all, what's wrong with that, right? Try doing that in reverse. Try doing that in reverse. Can't do it. Can't do it.
Right.
Can't do it. And Israel's the aggressor. Wait a second. You attacked Israel. When Israel hit you back, they told you they were hitting you back. You, like cowards, Hamas, hid behind women and children and babies and hospitals and orphanages and schools and said, oh, Israel did this to us. You hid like cowards and dogs behind babies and children, and whoever was your guest last week has offended me and has offended common sense in the area, right? Just general American common sense by suggesting somehow Israel's to blame for that. Israel's a stable democracy that takes care of its people, provides for the common defense. It is a bastion of democracy in the most unstable part of the world. To suggest somehow that they're the aggressor is not only wrong, it's just ridiculous.
I think, and also one of the things that people miss, you mentioned 1948, and again, that wasn't when the start of Israel was. But at the same time, I want to look at saying they are surrounded by, like you said, Hamas,
Hezbollah.
Then you have Iran.
That's correct.
When
pulling the strings geopolitically in that part of the world.
I still remember the statement that President
Ahmadinejad, yeah.
You remember the statement he said, if I had nuclear capabilities, he said I'd blow Israel back to the Stone Age.
That's right. He did say that.
And that kind of, we need to have understanding, even if it's a group of people that you don't, people say, well, they're Zionists and they're trying to eradicate. No, they want to live peacefully with Palestinians just as much as anybody else.
That's exactly right.
So,
that's exactly right. You go to Jerusalem and take a trip to Jerusalem, and you will find Muslims, Christians, and Jews living side by side in Israel with freedom and basic human health care and basic human rights and all these sorts of things that Hamas does not provide. And to suggest somehow that Israel is the aggressor is offensive.
Right. That's a great point, too. So then the last four, I got two more things I want to get to. We're so good on time. So we've talked a little bit about China, okay? And obviously you've already kind of stated that situation is destabilized. I mean, we had during Donald Trump, I always made the joke, I told kids, I said, hey, when Trump was, even though I didn't like him, but Trump got the Chinese to buy rice from us.
That's right. The man's a salesman.
Yeah.
The man's a salesman.
So, I mean, what needs to be done to stabilize that? I mean, obviously, we said lack of foreign policy, but what do you see the most destabilizing thing that has happened under the Biden administration with our relations with China?
Well, and I want to point out this idea that somehow the Chinese are becoming this world power. The fact of the matter is the Chinese economy is a house of cards that could topple at any time.
You are exactly right.
And so, a little bit of strength shown against them in the way that Donald Trump did would cause them to retract so much of the things that they're involved in, right? But the Biden administration just has had no stomach to do anything at all. I mean, there is no Biden foreign policy. It just doesn't exist.
Right.
I mean, the Clinton administration, the Obama administration had a doctrine. And so I'm not saying this is right or left, right?
That administration.
The current Biden administration has nothing.
Right.
And so for Kamala Harris to come in and say, well, I'm going to fix that, you've been the vice president for 3.5 years. Your day one started 3.5 years ago.
Okay. Well, the last thing, and I know this will take up the remainder of our time, but I I have 2 copies of this, and I typed it up again, but I added an extra question, and I kind of talked to the person last week about this, but I want to hear you. What do you think the role of the media in covering the Biden administration is compared to the Trump administration?
Right. Well, thank you. If you think back to when Donald Trump was president, and any time that he might miss a step when he's walking up a set of stairs, anytime he might, whatever, right? They would say, oh, he's having cognitive decline. Oh, he needs to see a psychiatrist. He's having cognitive decline. When the man is on the ball, he's just on the ball. They covered up the cognitive decline, and I mean serious cognitive decline of the President of the United States until a point in time, and by that I mean Joe Biden, until a point in time in which the entire country saw him live on television and who said, oh, yeah, he's losing it. He's losing it.
That debate was a killer.
Yes, it was.
That debate was a killer because when you saw him trying to carry on any kind of logical, I watched that and I was like, there's no,
That's exactly right.
After that debate, I said, there's no way you could put Mickey Mouse in there.
That's right.
And beat Joe Biden.
And the Biden administration, including Kamala Harris, is responsible for hiding that from the American people. And to another degree, as is the media. People say, well, Donald Trump will go out and talk to the press for hours. When was the last time Kamala Harris had a press conference?
To my knowledge, I don't think she has.
Right. Why isn't someone keeping her accountable for that?
Right.
There is a huge double standard that exists.
So, and I think this is a good point to bring up because this is what we talked about last week too. And surprisingly enough, this particular Democrat that we had on, I said, so what's your news source? And I do not watch the news.
I'm at a point where I really watch very little television.
Same.
Yeah.
Same.
And you say, well, you watch One America, Fox News. No, I really don't. I don't. I do think in general, most Americans probably don't watch the news for information. They watch it for affirmation, right? Most Americans want to watch somebody who's going to tell them that they're right about the way they think.
Yes.
I don't really watch the news much at all. I just don't.
And I've told people too and it's getting to the point now though. I read a lot of news. I do newspapers. We're getting ready to start a newspaper project in government here for this election.
Great. Yeah.
And but now it's even getting to the point where I had a friend one time who said that we're using the St. Louis Post-Dispatch, and he said, "Man, that's a liberal rag." And
I think he's right. I think he's right. Yeah. But you don't have a ton of options, right?
No, you don't.
Local newspapers do a wonderful job of promoting their community.
That's what they're
serving as an ambassador for their schools and their towns. But they're not getting involved in any issue that is a little controversial.
They don't want to. Right.
And hey, the people say, who's the most important person at a newspaper? It's not the editor. It's a salesman, right? You got to sell newspapers.
Yeah.
And if you start offending people in your local community, you're not going to sell newspapers.
Yeah.
So I think that local papers do a really fantastic job of covering ribbon cuttings and local sports and things like that. And I think that's what their role is, and they do a very good job of it.
But so this whole where I go to. And actually, one of my favorite news sources is News Nation. I don't know if you've heard of them before.
I'm not terribly familiar. No.
They're tiny.
Mm-hmm.
They're tiny, and they are. If you go to, I think it's Pew Research has a chart where everybody's at on the chart.
Mm-hmm.
And I've done my research, and I used to watch.
And by the way, Pew's very respected.
Yeah.
Very respected.
And I've watched BBC, but BBC started to drift some. I watched AP is slowly drifting left, and I saw this News Nation, and I subscribed to them on my feed, and I'm not gonna lie, that's where I get a lot of because it's just, the Walter Cronkite, just
the facts.
I'm just gonna read the news.
That's right.
And so, but anyway, Chad, we are so happy that you joined us tonight.
No, my pleasure.
And,
enjoy doing it.
Anything you want to give a plug to, or anything we need to promote? When's session start? When does the next session start?
So by law in the state of Missouri, session starts the first Wednesday after the first Monday in January.
Mm-hmm.
So this year it's one of the later starts you could have. It's January 8th, and it'll run through the second Friday of May at 6 p.m. Everything has to, by law, be done by then.
And you guys, and just to clarify, you guys usually take care of budget and all that stuff usually in the first month?
Oh, no. The budget, by law, also has to be done the week prior to the end of session.
Really?
So budget meetings will start in January.
But getting everything
And
finalized.
everything gets the House generally gets it done first, right? Sends it to the Senate. The Senate has a little bit of time, and by a little bit I mean maybe 2 weeks to work through it. Send it back to the House. All that really kind of gets fired up toward the middle to end of April.
Okay. And any legislation that you guys are really looking at to really kind of go after this year, or anything? What's the Republican goal on Missouri level this
I
year?
think one issue in the state of Missouri that exists that I think is important is initiative petition reform. What is initiative petition reform? So let's say you're outside Walmart and somebody says, "Oh, sign this form so that we can put whatever on the ballot," right? The Missouri Constitution. Well, you're a government teacher. The United States Constitution is sacred. It's been amended 18 times in 250 years, right? It's hard to amend the United States Constitution because it should be sacred.
Right.
It shouldn't change based on whatever whatever way the political winds are blowing in a given year. It takes a 2/3 majority vote to
propose it, and 3/4 to ratify.
It's exactly right, and the X amount of states have to do so. It's a process, and it becomes sacred once it's done. In the state of Missouri, to put something in the Constitution of the state of Missouri, you have to get X amount of names on a newspaper, on a piece of paper,
on ballot or on a petition.
On a petition, and then it takes 50% plus one, 50% plus one, which is why in the Missouri Constitution you find things like bingo in the Missouri Constitution. So my point is always the United States Constitution does not delineate these specific things. The United States Constitution sets out a framework for a way in which the government should operate, but it doesn't delineate specific things.
Right.
That's the way the Missouri Constitution should be.
It should be.
So there's a lot of things that exist in the Missouri Constitution that should exist in Missouri statutes. So making the Missouri Constitution a more sacred document, I don't think is a bad thing at all, right?
No.
Raising that threshold for making something constitutional, I think, is a good thing. And so we're looking at making the Missouri Constitution more like the U.S. Constitution.
I was going to say,
how does that end up looking? I'm not sure, but that's something we're moving toward.
Every time the Secretary of State sends me my free copy of the Missouri Constitution, it seems like it just gets a little bit thicker every time.
Yeah, you can read the United States Constitution in 15 minutes.
Right.
The Missouri State Constitution is going to take you hours and hours.
That's a sit and read.
Right.
So, well, we want to thank you, Chad. Thank you for being on tonight. Folks, thanks for joining us. We'll have another guest next week. As Sean always says, be a friend, tell a friend, and we'll see you all next time.
Thanks for listening to the Voice of Reason podcast. Check out our previous shows and clips on Facebook, YouTube, and TikTok.